what I think is one of the sort of messiest aspects around mobile health wearables, which is law. Michael's got 6 books? Something like that. I haven't decided which one of those I'm going to add to my wish list yet.
All of them.
On Amazon, all of them.
No reason to be selective.
But so former Harvard Medical School professor, now at Michael H Cohen Law Group. So Michael, go ahead.
Do the laws governing medical technology shape our future? Or is that future moving toward us too fast for regulation? How do we regulate a moving target when the rate of movement is exponential? As a healthcare lawyer, when I look at the $3-something trillion health and wellness market, I divide it into products on one side and services on the other. So products are like wearables, drugs, devices, things that are essentially regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. Services are more on the healthcare law side, and when I say healthcare law, I include a wide variety of laws, a lot on the state side. But that regulates things like practitioners, facilities, hospitals, clinics, labs, pharmacies, medical service organizations, MSOs, medical spas, and all sorts of health and wellness ventures. To give you an example of the kinds of questions that arise, a professor came to me recently. He'd done some research and he discovered that a certain probiotic helps mice beat cancer and live 4 times longer. And he wanted to know whether he could market that as a dietary supplement. And could he use the animal studies to make claims about humans? On another side, a medical spa advertises that it hires doctors for services. Is it engaged in what we call corporate or unlicensed practice of medicine and fee splitting? Or an acupuncturist came to me with a topical herbal product that is indicated for pain relief. Can she market that as a simple cosmetic, or is it an OTC drug, which is more heavily regulated? Like many medical technologies, wearables are disruptors in the legal framework. For example, an entrepreneur came to me with a virtual reality headset that he wants to sell to learning centers to help children who have difficulties learning in school. Is that a regulated medical device? Or is it simply a software program? In his marketing, can he use phrases like trains the brain, or helps you learn faster, or improves your memory? And is the data that's captured by the system subject to HIPAA privacy and protection and data security rules? Practicing law is not binary. There are very few ones and zeros. There are very few yes-no answers. It's more like someone is saying, I'm speeding into the yellow zone, and how much time do I have before it turns red? Or how do you fit a hexagonal peg into an octagonal hole? Or is it better to ask for permission than forgiveness? An entrepreneur client told me, it's difficult to tell whether the business you're in is legal enough. And that's really well said. So somebody invents an app or a wearable, and what you do is you upload a picture of your skin onto the system. It turns out that if a doctor reads that remotely in another country and gives you a diagnosis, we call that telemedicine. So that's regulated as a telemedicine issue. But if the software itself contains an algorithm and the machine itself tells you whether you have a low, medium, or high risk of melanoma, then we call that a medical device. So what's the difference? Clearly we're moving more into that device arena. As it turns out, this was removed from the market by the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, because they said that the evidence was not sufficient to show that the product could do what it said it did, which is to detect your risk of melanoma. Now, the legal risk for entrepreneurs and ventures is not only from the FDA and FTC and other alphabet government agencies, but also from private plaintiffs. So recently, someone put a sleep tracking function out on a wearable, and it turns out that the sleep tracking technology was challenged as being inadequate. So some very clever plaintiff's lawyer looked at people who were getting less sleep than they thought they were getting, and he assigned a number to that level of damages. Let's say $1,000. And let's say 50,000 consumers were injured, so you just do the math, and you've got a $50 million class action lawsuit. Because the market moves so fast, it's really hard for people with new ideas to predict liability and to get products to market. And regulators can't enforce all the rules all the time. To help create more clarity, recently the FDA decided that it would take mobile apps and it would divide them into three categories. Mobile medical apps, those that are going to be regulated as medical devices, things that are not mobile medical apps, they're just apps, and things where FDA has enforcement discretion. Enforcement discretion is what it sounds like. FDA can look at it on a case-by-case basis and decide what it wants to do. Now, what is a mobile medical app? It's an app that essentially transforms the platform into a regulated device. Or it's something that does so by claiming that the software is intended to diagnose or treat disease. So for example, if you have a sensor or lead to display your ECG, that's a mobile medical app, medical device. Or if your iPhone has an app on it that can measure the degree of tremor caused by Parkinson's, that's a mobile medical device. On the other hand, things that provide electronic copies of medical reference books or educational tools for providers or patients, these are not in the regulated medical device category. What about things like motivational guidance to help quit smoking? This is in that ambiguous enforcement discretion category. In a second innovation, FDA recently released guidance on what it calls low-risk general wellness products. Now this is really great because what it does is it takes these things out of the medical device arena. So for example, if your app or wearable makes claims about healthy eating or promotes healthy weight, you're talking about a lifestyle choice that's going to lead to general wellness. And if your device is low risk, like exercise equipment or video games or a lot of wearables and apps, then it falls into this guidance. But you can't talk about obesity. You can't talk about ADHD because these are diseases. You have that same line. But where is the line? For example, you can make a claim that a wearable or an app will help you fall asleep, for example, through hypnotic induction. But what if you say that it helps you fall asleep because you're somebody who has trouble falling asleep? Well, now you've made a claim about curing insomnia. The difficult we do at once. The impossible takes a little bit longer. This is the path of medical technology. Science fiction becomes science fact. And the singularity is near. Paradigm shifts in medical technology are becoming so common that they represent a rupture in the fabric of human history. The singularity, for people who like Ray Kurzweil, means that we're entering an era in which we are merging with our devices, with machine intelligence. Is this a utopia, the dawning of a new civilization that will allow us to transcend our non-biological selves? The market is exploding with all sorts of innovation that are leading in that direction. For example, consumerization, a big theme in this conference. The trend, the movement from exclusively professional medical knowledge toward knowledge that everybody can access. People can turn to Dr. Google, they can bring their wearable data, and we talk a lot about patient empowerment. People can bring their own information into the equation. Predictive analysis, machines learning generationally. I have one client who's involved in machine teleradiology, and they're trying to show that the machine can have fewer false positives and false negatives and better predictive results than a human radiologist. And bionics, increasing reliance on our own technology, and ultimately this merger of human and machine. So back to law. When we think about applying relatively static, slow-moving laws to dynamically changing medical technology, we have two opposing trends. So technology wants to make you the CEO of your own health, whereas government is trying to shrink-wrap regulation around innovation. Now, law can't completely tackle the dark side of technology. So Nick Bostrom of Oxford University argues that we could have a runaway artificial intelligence. For example, if the AI is programmed to maximize production of paper clips using any means at its disposal, it could turn not only a factory or a planet, but the entire cosmos into a giant collection of paper clips. Our devices are feedback machines. They analyze data, news, how you're feeling, what your mood is, what your weight is, what your relationships are, where the car should drop you off on the way to work. And your smart refrigerator is going to friend you on Facebook pretty soon. Medical technology is the spearhead of human transformation as I see it. That's why I'm so excited about it. Because our methods of delivering care coincide with this epic, momentous change in human identity. Let's look at the evolution of medicine from these paradigm shifts. So we start out with house visits in the white coat. Pretty soon we move to office visits. Now we have online telemedicine visits, which was new as of a couple of years ago. Now we have mobile visits, people visiting their doctor on their wrist Dick Tracy watches. Moving to the wearable visits, the quantifiable self, virtual reality visits, humanoid robot visits, where the robots pass the Turing test, moving to brain-to-brain communication, and ultimately it's predicted to the downloadable self. And these are just some examples of the trajectory. So although creative regulatory developments, like the ones by the FDA that I pointed out, are very useful in moving products more quickly to market and into the hands of patients who need them, three issues still loom in the marketplace. One, the regulatory landscape, as I've indicated, is really a giant Rubik's Cube that's very difficult for companies, patients, and even lawyers to put together. And secondly, the line between feedback or data about our health habits, or general wellness on one hand, and medicine on the other, is increasingly difficult to draw. And that's a challenge because that's a big line, both on the state law side in terms of licensing rules, and on the federal side in terms of how the FDA defines medical devices. So it's becoming harder and harder to pretend that there is a place where general wellness ends and medicine begins. And third, medical technology accelerates exponentially, whereas legal change evolves in a linear fashion. So it's hard for the laws to keep up with accelerating change. Where to crossroads itself from law, although helpful as a regulator, is inadequate. Technology evolves faster than law and eclipses our ability to regulate. Still, for now, law is the mediator. It has a role in determining who gets to market, under what circumstance, and what is the level of cost for regulatory burden. Since medical technology and law evolve at different rates, all I can say is that we need wisdom as well as rules. After all, this isn't just about healthcare law, it's really about who we're becoming with all of this transformation. And the definition of health, according to the World Health Organization, encompasses not only physical health, but also mental and emotional health, and also social well-being. And there's no social well-being in the universe of paperclips, unless you're a colored paperclip. That was the line of humor in the talk. So as Einstein said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So we need a higher level of consciousness. So on a deeper level, as a lawyer, I see a race for our future as a species with law somewhere in the middle, but really, we've got accelerating technology on one hand, and we have consciousness on the other. So we need wisdom in our rulemaking, and we need a higher level of wisdom in addition to our rules. And that's a collaborative effort. And ultimately, the evolution of medicine and of law and health is about the evolution of humanity itself. It's more than about disease care and getting rid of illness. It's about transforming our bodies and minds into vessels that can survive and best express our cosmic endowment into the millennia ahead. Thank you.
Do you want to start by taking a couple of questions? So we'll start with just a couple of questions for Michael, and then we'll go to the full panel questions.
So I've been working in the mobile health space a little bit, and I know the FDA is taking kind of a wait-and-see approach to some of the different classes of mobile health apps. Do you ever see them moving to more concrete definitions or more consistent enforcement of those regulations?
Well, enforcement discretion means by its definition that it's going to be inconsistent. But I think the mobile medical guidance is very useful because what they did is instead of having everything in the direction of enforcement discretion where people couldn't predict it all, they said these are the ones we're definitely going to regulate. And what they did is they basically imported the medical device definition and they brought it over and they gave examples. So I would encourage people in the space to go and read the FDA mobile medical app guidance, especially the appendices, because they lay it out very clearly. A, these are all the ones that we're going to regulate. B, these are the ones we won't regulate. And then that leaves Exhibit C, where we're still guessing. But I would predict that over time, some of the ones in C are going to move into A and B, and so there'll be more clarity for people in that regard. Let's go over here, we'll come back around.
Can you comment on the insertion of politics into regulation? And one of the examples, I don't know if it's happening in the wearable field, but if you look at a nutritional supplement, certainly politics played a big role in them not being regulated.
Definitely. Well, the DSHEA, the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act of 1994, was one of the most heavily consumer-lobbied laws in American history. And it's because before that, FDA was basically, just to take a step back, there's two categories, foods and drugs. So drugs need approval for safety and efficacy before they get to market. That takes millions of dollars and many, many years. Foods go through a different process. So the question was, when you take your vitamin C capsule, is that a food which can just go on the shelf unless it's dangerous? Or is it a drug where you need scientific proof? So what the DSHEA basically said is, the reason you can go to any store and buy your supplements today is because of the DSHEA. Companies can make structure function claims or general wellness claims, but they can't make disease claims. So that's that line. So for example, if you want to be in a happier mood, you can take St. John's wort for mood. But no one is going to put St. John's wort out for depression. You can only do it for mood because that's a structure function claim. So that's the analogy I gave about sleep, but you can't say sleep if you have trouble falling asleep. So there is that line that the politics of the DSHEA hold between general wellness and medicine. And by and large, even though it's untenable in a long-term respect, it creates epistemological chaos. The language of it is hard to sustain, but it does allow people to get to market and make structured function claims. So that's been a big window. Because consumers want it. How many people take dietary supplements? Some people. Some people won't admit. Okay. Anything on this side, then we'll come back? No?
Just going to ask, how does claim adjustment make when there's a provider or healthcare provider on the other side? So is there a way for early mobile startups to get around this hurdle as they develop technology to have a provider on the side sort of looking at the data and confirming it and then pushing that claim or that insight to the patient?
Right. So I think this is one place where we're going to need to push the regulation even further, because going back to this line between general wellness and medicine, the whole point is to move the data from the patient to the medical side, right? To make some kind of usefulness, some kind of medical use of the data. So as that happens, this line between general wellness and medicine is going to be harder to draw. Now, right now, where people get in trouble is when the manufacturer or distributor makes those claims. So going back to the dietary supplement analogy, there was a case where a patient had a testimonial that the supplement was useful for cancer relief. And the company put like on its Facebook page. And FDA said, look, this is the company basically making a claim that the supplement is useful in disease care. So it's a very assertive posture by FDA, and I think there's going to have to be some rethinking.
So in the world of mobile apps, it would be the tech or platform company couldn't make the claim, but the doctor behind it could.
Yeah, I think it's difficult for manufacturers and distributors to make claims, because when they make claims, they have to be, if it goes through a 510K clearance process, that particular indication for use has to be cleared. However, the practice of medicine is carved out, because the practice of medicine is something that's in the domain of the states. Doctors can basically, subject to their licensure, say what's useful to a patient. So those conversations are protected. So this is a place where you've got federal law, you've got state law, you've got medical practice, and you've got evolving cultural norms, and the rules kind of mediating these conversations to some extent.
So we're at the end of our scheduled time. Again, as we've mentioned, all three speakers have said that they'll stay after for additional questions. So if the three speakers want to kind of all come to the main area, give them all one last round of applause. for coming, and any of those of you who want to stay and ask questions, they can make themselves available.
Oh, that's maybe I don't know.